18-year-old Carrie Spafford's fiance, Colonel Elmer Ellsworth, was killed in military action on May 24, 1861. Carrie mourned the loss of Ellsworth for years and later married Frederick Brett. By 1892, she must have felt that her life of sorrow was in the past, but within a 6-month period from September 1892 to March 1893, Carrie lost her father, her husband, and her beloved son, who was just 22 years old. Welcome to an audio version of an original article by Kathi Kresol, operator of Haunted Rockford Paranormal Events, Rockford, Illinois. This audio presentation is entitled Rockford's Fair Daughter and contains the 2017 story of the same name. The story originally appeared in the 2017 book Haunted Rockford Illinois by Kathi Kresol. This audio article is produced by Thomas Saunders for Haunted Rockford. Charles Spafford and his wife came to Rockford in 1839. They became well known and highly respected as one of Rockford's founding families. Carrie, their eldest child, was born on December 2, 1843. The Spafford family hosted lavish parties, and Carrie was considered to be a gracious hostess. It was at one of these gatherings in 1859 that young Carrie met the dashing Elmer Ellsworth. Ellsworth was quite taken with the 16-year-old Carrie. Ellsworth worked in Chicago in a patent office, but his real interest was in being a professional soldier. He was particularly interested in a French military unit called the Zouaves, a predecessor of the French Foreign Legion. They had elaborate and bright uniforms that were very distinctive. Elmer actually studied French to assist him to master the Zouave drills. He then formed his own military unit to travel the country and participate in parades. Carrie returned Elmer's affections, but this young couple had one formidable challenge in their relationship: Carrie's father. Charles Spafford was a self-made man who had no time for these fancy young men who didn't seem to have any business sense. He demanded that Ellsworth find a more suitable profession if he wanted to pursue Carrie's hand, and since Ellsworth wanted to be worthy of Carrie's family, he went off to Springfield to become a lawyer. While he was pursuing his new career, he met the young Abraham Lincoln. They became close friends, and when Lincoln won the election in 1861, Ellsworth followed him to Washington. In fact, Ellsworth became devoted to the entire Lincoln family. Ellsworth was trained as a professional officer, and when the Civil War began, he raised the 11th New York Infantry Regiment. While he was away, he often wrote Carrie. One of Ellsworth's letters to Carrie stated, quote, "My own darling Kitty, the highest happiness I looked for on earth was a union with you. Your letters are the only stars in my night of loneliness and trouble." End quote. On May 24, 1861, Ellsworth offered to assist Lincoln by removing a Confederate flag that was hanging in a tavern across the Potomac River in the neighboring town of Alexandria. Ellsworth gathered up a few men, marched over, and entered the tavern. They climbed up the stairs, removed the flag, and were coming back down when the tavern owner, James Jackson, fired a shot into Ellsworth's chest. He died instantly. One of Ellsworth's companions, Corporal Francis Brownell, shot Jackson dead. Brownell would later be awarded the Medal of Honor. Ellsworth would be the first officer to die in the Civil War. Lincoln was devastated by the loss of his dear friend. He ordered Elmer's body to be displayed in the White House on May 24, 1861. Thousands of people filed through to look at the face of this hero. Elmer's body was then sent to his hometown of Mechanicville, New York, to be buried. The news of Ellsworth's death hit all of Rockford very hard. Newspaper headlines from the day mentioned that all of Rockford mourned the loss of this esteemed man who had won the heart of one of the town's fair daughters. There was a special memorial service held to honor the fallen soldier at the Second Congregational Church. Carrie and her family were invited to participate in the funeral, but Carrie was too devastated to attend. She would mourn the loss of her young man for years. Carrie eventually met and married Frederick Brett. Their wedding in 1866 was a major event in that year's social season. They moved to Boston for 10 years and then to Chicago. They had a son named Charles, after her father. Charles grew into a fine young man any family would be proud of. He graduated from Beloit College in 1892 and found a position as a teacher in St. Louis, Missouri. By the time of young Charles's graduation in 1892, Carrie must have thought that her life of sorrow was in the past, but she would soon suffer even greater losses than before. Within a 6-month period from September 1892 to March 1893, Carrie lost her father, her husband, and her beloved son. He was only 22 and had contracted typhoid. Carrie spent the rest of her life serving her community, taking a particular interest in the YWCA and in women's issues. She devoted her life to making the lives of women in Rockford better. The Spafford mansion on Madison Street would eventually be given to the YWCA by Carrie's sister, Eugenia, who was the last Spafford to live in it. Carrie's work with the community couldn't fill the void in her life completely. Frequently, she would dress in her mourning garb and visit the cemetery where all of her family was laid to rest. Carrie would be seen at Cedar Bluff Cemetery at all hours of the day and night, dressed in her black mourning dress with her beautiful face covered by a veil. Her sobs could be heard all throughout the area of the family plot. People would later call the sight of her heartbreaking as she spent hours kneeling at the graves of her family. Carrie eventually passed away on October 10, 1911. Even after her death, people would still report seeing a woman, all dressed in black, in the area of the Brett family stone. Sometimes she would pass by as others were visiting their family members laid to rest nearby. She never made a sound, but as she passed, the observers would feel a bone-chilling wind swirl by them, even on the hottest of days. These sightings continue today. Others claim that Carrie's sobs can still be heard, seeming to come from all directions at once, filling all who hear the sound with an incredible sadness. This is the end of our audio article. Thanks for listening.